Hey South Hills, little did you know that we actually have a staff from all of our campuses that come together to make sure that we are aligned, we are unified, that we're moving in the same direction, because the way South Hills does church, we want to make sure that we're doing it in an effective way at all of our campuses that's going to be insightful and relational, and it's going to help you to connect to the presence of God and draw closer to God every single day. And the beauty about our staff is that they lead by example by making sure that their hearts are surrendered to God. And I just want to let you in behind the scenes so you can see the time and energy that our staff steps into serving you. So today, before you leave, find a staff member at whatever campus you're at and just thank them. Thank them for all the work and all the hours and all the sacrifice that they put in to make sure that when you come to church, you're getting an amazing experience to follow God with all of your heart.
Thank you so much for being here, everybody. We want to welcome everybody that's watching online as well. And last week was so cool. It was awesome to have Easter here. It was amazing. It was just a great time where a lot of lives were changed, quite frankly. It was a really beautiful moment for our church. But I found myself interested when I got home, I was so tired. And you know, it was filled with a mixture of excitement for what God's doing in our church, but also I was exhausted. We had a little party for Vic. And it's weird, it's like, I feel like I'm getting older. It's like, I used to be able to eat that. I can't eat that anymore. I don't like what it does to me. 10:30 seems super late now. It's like 10:30. And also, I find myself saying something to my kids that I never thought I'd say that my parents used to say. And that is, well, when I was a kid. You know, when my parents would always say that, well, when I was a kid, we didn't have TV. You know, and now I'm saying that. You know, when I was a kid, we didn't have helmets when we rode bikes. You know, when I was a kid, there was no car seats. I'd ride in the bed of a pickup truck. We would make our own ramps, not buy them at Costco or anything. And these rickety ramps, we'd go off these ramps on our bikes with no helmet when I was a kid, as if to say these unsafe things were a badge of honor of some kind. And now I'm doing that with my girls. But I find out I get a little bit carried away, because I wanted to show my girls how to go down the driveway on their roller skates or skateboard. So I said, you know what? I didn't tell them go down the driveway. I said, let me show you how to go down the driveway. So I went down on my skateboard, bend your knees, lean forward, and then I try to tell them that I'm showing you how to do it. I'm guiding you how to do it. Now you do it. And so Piper eventually got all the way down the driveway. It was great. And Phoebe was a little bit nervous, so she'd kind of veer off halfway. And then she'd kind of jump on the grass. I'm like, you could do this. I know you could do this. I believe in you. I know you got this. So finally she goes, okay. She goes all the way down, and she did it. And I taught her, if you ever need to fall on your knees, you're fine. But I got a little carried away. And I'm like, I remember when I was a kid, and I used to make fun of all the kids wearing all the pads. I'm like, dude, you don't need all those pads. I'm like, Phoebe, ditch the elbow pads. She goes, are you sure? Melody's like, no. They make those for a reason. I'm like, nobody uses those. Nobody uses elbow pads. You need maybe knee pads or a helmet. And she goes, okay, I trust you. So she ditches the elbow pad. The very next moment, as if God is saying, check this out, Melanie. The very next moment, she goes down the driveway, and all of a sudden she starts doing this. And I'm like, no, like in slow motion, running to her. Whap, falls right, the very next moment, right on her elbow, okay? You got a picture of that? The very next moment. Yeah, right? And I look at her, she looks at me, she starts to cry. I'm like, no. And I don't even want to look at Melanie because I know the look. Dads, you know the look your wife gives you. It's the mixture of I'm concerned for my baby and you're a total moron. I just told you it was going to happen. It was like, oh no. But here's the deal. I was actually, you know what, even though I took it a little overboard, I was so proud of them that they actually went down the driveway. Why? Because I knew that they could do it. Even though they didn't think they could do it, I pushed them a little bit, and I knew that they were going to be uncomfortable, but I knew that they could do it. Now, maybe that's happened to you. Maybe you've had a teacher or a coach or a friend or a mentor who said, I see something in you. I know that there's something in you, and I'm going to push you a little bit to get you there. And maybe some of you are here as a result of that, of somebody pushing you to do something like that. And what's interesting is that now here's the deal. By the way, when I was a kid and we did this, I didn't think that she was going to hurt herself that bad because like any other kids go off ramps, you paid for that in flesh. And do you remember the pedals we used to have? Check that out. Anybody remember those pedals? You miss your foot, man. That's, so I didn't think anything major was going to happen to her, right? But hey, it happened. But again, we were proud of her that she did it. The New Testament is filled with stories of Jesus pushing his disciples into doing things that they didn't think they could do. Feed these 5,000 people. Sure, great. With what? He's constantly pushing them. These guys were not bodyguards, guys. They were not trained Secret Service members, but they were constantly managing crowds of people that wanted to get close to Jesus. They weren't prepared for that. They weren't trained for that. They were asking them to befriend people that were on the fringes of society, demon-possessed people, prostitutes, tax collectors. They weren't used to dealing with people like this. He was constantly pushing them out of their comfort zone. He was challenging their religious norms. They grew up with a certain religious ideas and beliefs, and he was constantly flipping that upside down too. So he's constantly pushing his disciples into things that they didn't think that they could do, constantly. And it's no wonder they were confused. If you read the Gospels, they're confused a lot of the time. They're constantly asking questions. They're constantly doubting. They're constantly saying, are you sure? They're constantly getting it wrong or putting their foot in their mouth. They're trying to figure it out, but he's saying, I see something in you that's different, that's unique. I'm gonna take you somewhere that you don't think that you can go. Now, this brings us to the very first Easter. Their mentor, their friend, their teacher, their master, he is now dead. Their whole entire thing is now crushed. Their movement, their hope, all their dreams that they had, it's all done. But then he comes back to life. So then they see him and they're constantly, they're still doubting. Thomas very, very, very famously said, unless I see the holes in his hands and his feet, I just can't buy this. It's just too big. It's too confusing. It doesn't make any sense. So he's in front of them, he's alive, and he's with them, and they're kind of all over the map. They're filled with excitement that he's alive. They're filled with doubt, like, is it really him? Is he a ghost? Can I touch? What is this like? I don't understand. So they're kind of confused. They don't really know what to do with all this emotion. And in the middle of all this emotion, he gives them his most important commandment. The biggest thing around. He challenges them with this bold new challenge. In Matthew 28:16, he says this, then the 11 disciples went to Galilee, the mountain where Jesus had told them to go. When they saw him, they worshiped him, but some doubted. Then Jesus came to them and said, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go, make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, of the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. Now, they're still trying to wrap their mind around, is he really here? Is he still alive? And now they're still trying to figure that out. He's telling them, go to all nations. These 11 guys, go to all nations. Now, you might be asking, well, what does it really mean to disciple somebody? What does that mean? I hear that a lot in church. What does that mean? Well, what it means to make disciples is the Greek word that's translated make disciples is matheteo, which comes from the root word mathetes, meaning learner or pupil. So what does that mean is it's sort of like an apprentice. And in this culture, what they would do is they would have an apprentice, whether it's masonry or shipworking or whatever, and you would learn how to do it. And then once you saw what they were doing, then you would do it themselves. So that's the kind of the root of what it means to make disciples. I'm seeing you do it. I'm watching you do it. Okay, now I think I could do that as well. Okay, now, this seemed like a big task. Think about this. This is 11 dudes. Go make disciples of all nations. Can you imagine if you're one of these guys, you're thinking, sure, why don't we just conquer the Roman Empire with sticks while we're at it? This is a huge request. How in the world are we supposed to do this? All nations, These are guys, by the way, that he brings together that just got done doubting him, denying him, and abandoning him. So not only is that a big request, are you sure you want me? I literally just doubted you, I denied you, and I abandoned you, and you want me to do this? Are you sure? After all that, he gives them this huge responsibility, this huge command, go make disciples of all nations. But here's the deal. Jesus does not shy away from this command. He doesn't say, well, if you can, if you've got free time, it'd be really good if you did, buck up, camper, you could do it. He's emphatic. In fact, he uses the word all about 3 or 4 times. I have all authority. Make disciples of all nations. Teach them all the commands. I am with you always. He is not messing around here. He couldn't be more emphatic of what he expects them to do. He's not shy about this. Now, this is a huge, huge responsibility. It's actually commonly known as the Great Commission, and this was the moment that initiated it all. Now, you might be thinking to yourself right now, hold on a second. So God's master plan, to reach the world, is me, The world, is me. See, Jesus wasn't just talking to his disciples. He knew this was going to be recorded in the Gospels. He was talking to all of us who call him Savior, for our Father. This is for all of us. And you might be thinking, there's no way. I mean, I have a hard time inviting a neighbor to church. I'm supposed to make disciples of all. That's impossible. I just can't. That's too big. I'm not qualified for this. I don't know about the Bible that much. I barely just looked at it the other day. This can't possibly be me. This is for the professionals. This is your job, James. I can't do this. This is too big. I don't even know where to start. Well, here's where you start. Here's what one of the 12 described it this way. 1 John 2:6, whoever claims to live in him must live as Jesus did. Now, guys, Jesus, his entire life was one large example. That's why whenever you're in doubt, you have to follow Jesus. Do not follow a denomination. Do not follow just what a pastor says. Do not follow anything else. Always go back to Jesus. He is the example. He is it, okay? And I think we get confused when we start going off on all these different things. Just go right back to Jesus. Because his entire life was an example of what he wants us to do. Everything. He showed it. This is how I want you to respond to it. This is what I want you to do, and I want you to go out and do it. He showed us how to pray. He showed us how to trust. He showed us how to serve. He showed us how to resist temptation. He showed us what it meant to fully put our trust in him. And his life was an example to each of us so that our life can be an example to others. Okay? His life was an example to us so that we could be an example to others. Here's how Paul describes it in Philippians 4:9. Whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put it into practice, and the God of peace will be with you. Now, guys, listen. Throughout history, people have abused the name of God. They have claimed to represent God, but they have only done it to give themselves more power or wealth or notoriety or whatever. And they've thoroughly abused the name of God. And so that caused a lot of confusion, which would lead somebody like Gandhi say this, quote, I like your Christ, I do not like your Christians. Your Christians are so unlike your Christ. Now, we've abused this a lot. A lot of people that have claimed to represent God. And sadly, that's true because of bad examples. Now, you might be thinking, you know what? I'm not very good. I struggle with some of these sins myself. So you know what? Maybe I shouldn't say anything to anybody about Jesus. Wrong. That is not what I'm saying at all. Listen, you need to be able to be honest about all your shortcomings and all the stuff that you've got going on. It's not like, well, I've done a lot of wrong things, so I've disqualified myself. Quite the opposite. Jesus knows you're not perfect. He knows his disciples weren't perfect. They just abandoned him, denied him. He still chose them to do this. He knows you're not perfect. He knows that. The problem is when you have Christians claiming to be Christians, but think, well, now that I'm a Christian, I'm up here, and everybody else is down here. And I'm going to kind of mask all of my stuff because I want people to think that I know more or I'm closer to God in some way. So the closer to God I am, the more perfect I have to appear to be. And so what they've done is they've ruined the name of what it looks like to follow Christ because they've been so judgmental. I'm up here and you're wrong and you need to do this, and I'm not going to acknowledge any of my own stuff. I'm just going to point out your stuff. And that's when people go, well, I'm going to reject that. That's ridiculous, But those people are getting it totally wrong. They're missing the entire point. It's when we're honest about our shortcomings is when God really knows how, or when God can really use that. When you're missing the opportunity to say, this is what God's done in my life. When you try to pretend like you're perfect or you got everything figured out. You think, well, Pastor, I'm addicted to drugs. Great. Not the addicted to drugs part, but your story's that much better. Pastor, I'm an alcoholic. Terrific. Not that you're addicted to alcohol, but your story's that much better. Pastor, I'm addicted to sex or porn. Awesome. Not the addicted to porn or sex part. But you know what? Your story is going to be that much better because it shows what God can do in your life. You don't have to be perfect. You're not supposed to be perfect. You're supposed to be honest about what you're struggling with so that it can glorify God of what he's done in your life. It makes your story that much more relatable. It illustrates what Christ can do when you're following him. That's leading humbly. Paul was very honest about his flaws, and he also led by example. 1 Corinthians 11:1 says, follow my example as I follow the example of Christ. Notice Paul, with all of his authority and all of his influence, does not say, follow my example, period. He says, follow my example as I follow the example of Christ. He's putting it back on Jesus. Part of what it means, guys, to be a Christ follower is you leave a wake of Christ followers in your path, okay? That's what it makes. You're sharing your faith. You're leading others to him. Now, you might think, where does this start? How do I start? I mean, I can't reach the world. Where do I even start? You start with the people that are closest to you. You start in your own home, whether that's your family or roommates or friends or whatever. That's where you start. That's where you start. Parents, I'm talking specifically to you right now. You start with your kids. That's where you start. Your spouse, your kids, that's where you start. I heard a pastor, no joke, say this one time. I was like, whoa. He said he gave his kids permission to say any word that they hear him or his wife say in the house. think about that for a second. Think about that. Kids, you could use any word that you hear me or my wife say. That would not work in our house. Not because of Pastor James, but Melanie. She's like a sailor. Now, I know it's not always easy, but here's the deal. You'll be amazed on what the grace your kids will give you if they know you love them. That's the key. Your kids are going to give you a ton of grace if they know you love them, but it has to start there. Guys, I'm going to be really honest with you. Bringing up small children in our society right now scares me. I'm nervous what society is telling them what's right and wrong. I'm nervous what they're having or putting on teachers to teach our kids. That's some teachers that may not want to teach in this stuff, and they're putting on them. Quite frankly, guys, I'm nervous about what's happening in our state. You know what? I don't understand, and I'm nervous about this because we are in a state right now that cares far more about putting a thin cloth around our kids' mouths than they do about actual children's lives in the womb and right outside of the womb. Now listen, I am not trying to be political here. This is not a political issue. God couldn't be more clear. He says, I knew you and formed you in the womb. So when I see these things, does that mean that we should go judge anybody who's looking to end their pregnancy? No. We're to love them. We're to try to give them any possible resource to show them there's another way. There's another alternative. There's a way out of this without doing this. But there are ways to do this. But he has to love them. Now, I've heard, and I've had people ask me, James, you're a pastor, and are you worried about your kids going off the deep end? Because there's a lot of stories about pastors' kids or PKs and their kids. And I can't tell the future. I really can't. But in all of these situations that I've known, and I've known a lot of pastors' kids that went off the deep end. And I can honestly tell you, if they were to be honest with you, and if you were to ask them, are you the priority in your parents' life? They wouldn't even have said, I'm not even in the top 5. My parents are far more concerned about the church, about the building, whatever they're doing, about the finances, about all the issues that are going on in the church, and I'm not even really in the top 5. And so my first ministry is to Melanie and my girls before it is to you. Because if I'm not ministering to them or being there for them, I'm a phony. I'm just up here trying to sell you on something. You know, I've got to make sure that they are good first. And that's when my kids know that, then they're going to say, okay, you know what? I'm a priority to my dad. And it's not like I'm trying to grasp for attention. you know, it does take leading by example. Last week was really cool. It was a really neat moment for our family. The girls came downstairs and they had money. And I go, what are you doing with all your money? That's all your money. And they said, we want to give it to God. We want to give it to the church. And do you have a picture of that, by the way? And so they both brought it and they go, this is it. This is all we got. And so I was like, this is a really cool opportunity to show them what it is to tithe. So you don't have to give the whole thing. Let's just take 10% out. And they go, no, we want to give the whole thing. And I said, well, why? And they go, well, because we love Jesus and we love our church. Duh. You know, like, why is this hard for you, Pastor? So I'm like, I was so touched. And at that moment, I was like, you know what? Our kids don't have the best grades. They're not the best at athletics, but we're doing something right. We're leading them by example. We're showing them what it looks like to really trust God. Guys, if you don't trust God when times get tough and you pray and you're like, well, I'm not going to pray, they're not going to pray. If you go, I don't really view church as a priority or a need to go, I'll go whenever I want, they're not going to view it as a priority. If you're like, I don't need to get into the Word of God, they're not going to get into the Word of God. And here's the other thing, guys. If I would have said, I'm the pastor of this church, you will give all of your money, they would have done it reluctantly and out of fear. And the second they could make their own decision, they'd be out of there. That was their decision because of the example. But here's the really, really cool part. It wasn't just the example that Melanie and I give them. It was what Carrie gives them out there in the kids' ministry. It was the love she gives them. It was the volunteers that are out there. And it was you. The reason they're able to say they love God and they love the church is because you love them. You know, the kids are smart. They could tell. They could tell, look at, you know, if it's your phony or not. And they're seeing not just by the example of Melanie and I, but they're seeing by the example of all of you who serve here and all of you who love, and they see your generosity. They see your passion. So they said, I'm in it. I'm in it. Now, you may be thinking, well, Pastor, that's great, but I can't possibly be an example. You have no idea about my story. If you knew my story, you would say, I can't be an example. Well, have you been demon-possessed lately? Because Jesus used somebody that was demonically possessed. Let me tell you the story out of Luke. He sees this guy who's demonically possessed. He's terrorizing this entire area. They're like, you know, the entire community hates this guy. They want him killed. They chain him up. He breaks the chains. It's just a mess, right? And so finally, Jesus walks up, and it also illustrates the power of the name Jesus, because when Jesus walks up to this demonically possessed person, the demons are cowering and afraid of what Jesus is going to do to them. Just the power of his presence and his mighty name, right? So they're cowering. Jesus casts the demons out of this guy, and naturally, he wants to go with Jesus. Oh, thank you so much. Let me follow you. But look at what Jesus says. Luke 8:38 says this. The man from whom the demons had gone out begged to go with him. But Jesus sent him away, saying, return home and tell how much God has done for you. So the man went away and told all over town how much Jesus had done for him. Jesus did not say, there are over 600 commands in the Old Testament law. Go recite all of them. He did not say, go and tell everybody the tenets of your faith. He did not say, go to seminary, become a pastor, write a book, do a podcast, then go share it with people. He just said, listen, here's what I've done. Go tell people what I did. That's all you got to do. That's all you got to do. And like I said, the messier, the better. Little side note, we're starting a series next week on depression. I would encourage you to invite people. It's going to be a heavy series. This is an issue that's going on and very, very prevalent in our country and our world, and so we're going to address that. And we're going to show, even when you're at your darkest moments, though, God says, I still want to use that part. That's the part that I can use to help other people. Can you imagine if you could say, this is what God's helped me with my depression? You know how many people could say, wow, I don't even care how much of the Bible you've memorized. Tell me your story. I want to hear that. Now, Jesus breaks it down very, very simply. He simplifies it for all of us. He says, just love me and love your neighbor. Now, you might think, well, what if somebody rejects you? It's going to happen, guys. I remember I was so excited when I very first started going to church and I started getting into it. I was so excited, and I felt my job is to change everybody's life that I come in contact with. And I had this guy, he was a really good buddy of mine, and I went to college with him. And I was like telling him how excited I was about church, and I was giving him all these cool stories. And I thought I was kind of getting through to him. And finally he goes, hey, let's have lunch. I'm like, this is it. I'm going to lead him to Christ. This is going to be a great story. There's awesome. Yes. And what he wanted to meet with me to tell me was, dude, I know this is big for you, but it's not for me. I'm not interested in it. I don't really want any part of it. And I was crushed because I was like, I let you down, God. You gave me this assignment. You got this guy in my life. I screwed up. I'm sorry. I was like, listen, I do the life changing. Okay? And by the way, even though Jesus loved everybody unconditionally, people still rejected him. Right? So he's like, I'm going to do the life changing. Just go share your faith. And know that you're planting a seed. Jesus, anticipating the pushback, however, reminds people of who he is. Matthew 28:18 says, then Jesus came to them and said, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. He's not shy about that. Even if they reject me, I still have all the authority of heaven and earth. So if he holds all the authority of heaven on earth, what do we have to fear? And listen to what he says, his last words to his disciples. Teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you, and surely you will always to the very end of age. Now, the one with all the power, all the authority, the one who sacrificed himself for us, will never fail you, and he will always be with you. Go and make disciples. That's a big request, the biggest, most important one. And if that makes you feel overwhelmed and outmatched, the disciples would go, yeah, I get it. I know how you feel. Peter outright denies him 3 different times. But here's the thing. None of that seemed to matter to Jesus, that they doubted him or they rejected him or they abandoned him. It didn't really seem to matter to him, right? Because he seemed to believe that all you need is God's love to go and share it with the world. He seemed to believe that armed with his love, they were exactly what the world needed. Now, the same is true for you and I. Guys, this is not meant for a select few, however. One of the biggest misconceptions is that pastors somehow have some sort of a secret hotline to God, okay? So that pastors somehow, are just like these super people or something, and they've got these hotlines, especially the more famous pastors, But I want to encourage you today, don't fall for that. I think the word celebrity pastor is an oxymoron because our job is to make Jesus a celebrity in our community, not ourselves. We are simply here to serve you, to love you, and to shepherd you. That's the jobs God's given me. But he didn't say, you're better than them. I just have more responsibility, but I'm not better than you. We're in the same exact boat. We are here to sharpen each other. We're here to make each other. It's not so much student-teacher. It's really more student-student. We're looking to God and going, God, you're leading us, and we're doing this together. Okay? So I'm going to give you an example of this, of how we encourage each other. A couple weeks ago, I went to lunch with Lisa Safran, who's in our church. She's actually in the service right now. And we go to Board and Brew. And we're at Board and Brew, and we get our sandwiches, and the guy brings our sandwiches out. And she says, are you the manager? And he says, no, I'm the owner. And she goes, oh, this is my pastor, and we're about to pray for our food. Is there something we could pray for you about? I'll be honest with you guys. My first reaction was like, oh. I don't know if that's what I would do if I were you. He looked at her and he looked at me kind of shocked. And I go to this one all the time. And he said, actually, yeah. My father-in-law, my wife's husband, just died. And we're having a really hard time. Could you pray for that? I would have missed that if it's just Pastor James. It took Lisa to say, you know what? I'm getting prompted by the Spirit here, and I'm going to act on it. And she didn't do it in a judgmental way or just an off-putting way. It wasn't off-putting at all. It was very sweet and tender. And I was like, we are here for each other. We are here to make each other better. Guys, when it comes to spreading the gospel, when it comes to making disciples of all nations, let me be very, very clear. There are no professionals. So stop acting like there are. Stop saying, I'm not going to do it. That's their job to do it. It's all of our jobs. He said it to all of us. Whoever calls me, accepts me as their Savior, whoever knows me, this is what I expect you to do. Today, guys, as we leave today, understand this. Christianity goes beyond believing what Jesus said to doing what Jesus did. Now, why am I so excited about the future of this church? Why am I so excited about this building? Because it's pretty and shiny? No, that's nice, but it's a great tool to bring this DNA. Guys, I had a guy, pastor here, that's in charge of over weekend experience, and he came to this campus. And he told me, he said, James, you've got no signage, you've got no parking, you've got no kids, and this place is bubbling with excitement. You put this into a building, that thing's gonna explode with growth. It's so healthy. Why am I so excited about the future of this church? Guys, last week at Easter, we had our largest weekend attendance since before COVID, and we spent zero money on marketing. We didn't do any kind of a marketing blitz, or we didn't do all these fancy things out there. We didn't have a guest, celebrity out here. How did we have the biggest attendance since before COVID? Because you invited people. You did. You took that upon yourself. And you know the great part about this is when you brought people to church, you couldn't wait to introduce me to them. That love is what's going to expand this church. What's God's master plan for making disciples of all nations? You. What's God's master plan for this church in South Orange County? You. He's going to use you. That's why I'm so excited about this. It's just a matter of saying, okay, you can use me. You can use my stories. You all have one. Maybe you weren't demonically possessed, but you got one. You got one. You all have experiences. You all have love. He's going to use you. That's the master plan. So yes, I can't wait for what he has in the coming weeks as we move into this facility. Guys, just make no mistake. The way this is all happening and panning out on behind the scenes, it's a total miracle. It just is. It just is. The way it's all happening. I can't wait to share it all with you, but it's just a miracle. There's no doubt God's doing something, and he's going to use you to do it. He's going to use you to do it, and I'm excited about it.